Hi everyone, welcome to week 11 of our Composition 1 class. This week, we're going to continue to reflect on your sources for writing project 3. In particular, we're going to think about how those sources can help you explore your research question. As you work on your writing this week, don't forget about tutoring services available through Columbus State's online writing center. I actually work for the writing center, so if you ever want to, make an appointment with me to go over some of your work, I'd be happy to do that with you. Even if you don't have an actual draft, you might still want to get some feedback on your preliminary ideas by working with a tutor. And you can visit the Writing Center's webpage here for more information. As per usual, I have some reading for you to do. I would skim these chapters. There's one on reporting information, one on arguing a position, one on reflections, and then one on mixing genres. I wouldn't take the time to read these completely. I think that would be an awful lot of work, but I would glance over these chapters and see if you can find any useful information. I would also skim these chapters as well, which all sort of focus on MLA and properly using sources. So we have a chapter on quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing, a chapter on acknowledging sources and avoiding plagiarism, a chapter on documenting your sources, and then a chapter specifically on MLA. Now that you hopefully have your sources for writing project 3, you're going to begin generating some ideas. And one way to do this is to synthesize your sources. As the Norton Field Guide explains, synthesizing sources means bringing together ideas and information from multiple sources in order to discover patterns and gain new insights and perspectives. So synthesizing is kind of taking ideas from a bunch of different places and putting those together to see what new conclusions you can come to. The chart attached above, so this right here, can help you synthesize your sources. So go ahead and download that and fill it in, and then save it, and you'll submit it at the end of this week. After you fill in the chart, try to look for patterns. Are there certain ideas in your sources that overlap? Can multiple sources be used to help you support or explain a particular idea in your paper? Remember that you should ultimately use 3 to 5 sources in your writing project. There are spaces on the chart for 5 sources, but if you only plan on using 3, then that's fine. And you can take a look at some sample completed charts in the Student Success Gallery to get a sense of how other people have filled out those documents. And I'm going to go ahead and download this just so we can take a look at it now. All right, there we go. I had to change some settings on my recording device so that you could see this chart. So what you'll see here is the sources are kind of organized in these rows. So source 1, and you'll fill in each of these boxes. And then your second source, you'll fill in each of these boxes, and so on. So the first thing that you're going to put here, how this source relates to my question, your research question. And then in this box for your first source, how the info from the source relates to my own experiences and observations. And you'll type those notes here, and so on. So that's how this synthesis chart works. Okay, back to our tasks here. Let's move on to page 4. Task 11.3, you're going to develop a working thesis statement for your draft. Remember that the Norton Field Guide recommends that you begin by thinking of your overall topic as a question, which you've already done for this assignment. Your next step is to think about how you'll answer that question. And your answer is going to become the basis for your thesis statement. So start thinking about your thesis statement, your answer to the question that you've been focusing on for 2 weeks now. Begin by looking back at all of your previous notes, your source evaluations, your synthesis chart, really anything that you've been working on the past couple of weeks, and try out some ideas for possible thesis statements. It is quite possible that it will take you several tries to find a thesis statement that really works for you. And I have a couple of things here for you to keep in mind. Remember that your answer to your question doesn't have to be definitive. I want you to adopt some sort of stance in this paper, but your answer to your research question doesn't have to be black and white. Um, this is what we call an exploratory project. So you should have a stance, you should have some sort of position that you are developing throughout the paper, but it doesn't need to be a very firm stance. It's okay if you're still kind of exploring the ideas. And then for the second tip that I have here, your thesis will most likely evolve as you think more about your rhetorical situation. So, meaning your audience, your purpose, your media and design, those sorts of things. Maybe you'll decide that you want to propose something to your audience or inform your audience, or maybe take your audience on a thinking journey or something else. If you take a look at task 11.4, there are some different possibilities there. For task 11.4, you are going to be making your Wednesday discussion board post. In this post, I'd like you to post three things. One, your research question. Two, your working or tentative thesis statement for your paper. And then any concerns or questions you have about your thesis statement. Moving on. In task 11.5, you're going to be creating an outline or some other plan for your draft. There are multiple ways you could organize your project uh, for this assignment, kind of depending on your rhetorical situation. So consider your purpose, audience, and context. What's your main goal in your writing? What do you want readers to feel, think, or do? Who is your audience? Who are you going to be aiming your writing towards? How familiar will those people be with your topic and with your research? How much detail will you need to provide? And how can you guide your readers through your writing? Below are a few possible organizational structures you could use, but you're also welcome to come up with something else that you feel like works for your situation. So the first one here is an argument pattern, and I'm not going to, there's a lot of information here. I'm not going to take the time to read all of this to you. If you have any specific questions, feel free to contact me. I would be happy to help. We have an argument pattern, a report pattern, a proposal pattern, a reflection pattern, an IMRAD pattern. And this stands for Introduction, Methods, Results, and Discussion. I generally discourage people from trying this pattern. This is a very specific way of writing a paper, and if you're not really used to this sort of writing, it can be kind of hard to pull off. There is an example of this structure um, from Does Texting Affect Writing, which we looked at earlier in Unit 3. And for more information on this pattern, you can see page 311 in the Norton Field Guide. But again, this sort of pattern tends to work better if you are conducting what is called field research. So if you were like going out and doing interviews or surveys, if you're doing observations, or if you were doing like a science experiment, This pattern tends to work well for that sort of research. Your task, once you've considered those different organizational patterns, is to begin sketching out an organizational pattern for you, an outline or some other plan for your paper. You can make the plan formal with Roman numerals, for example, or informal, such as a web or a cluster. In either case, you should make it clear which kind of organization pattern you plan to use. Try also to be specific. Give details about what you'll focus on and say in each paragraph or in each major portion of your paper. Down here we have a visual method. So this is not a very formal organization, but it definitely you can tell that the person put a lot of thought into this. We have some color coding going on. We have kind of some graphs and other organizational strategies being used here. So this is if you want to take a more creative, a more visual approach, you might try something like this. Our next task, there we go. 11.6, this is making your Friday discussion board post. For your Friday post, what kind of organization pattern do you want to use for your draft? And why? Why do you think that pattern will work well for you? Also, find a chapter in the field guide that you think will help you most with your writing for Writing Project 3. Then tell your classmates which chapter you chose and one key thing you learned from it. Also, don't forget to comment on at least two of your peers' posts for this week. Do you have suggestions for their thesis statement, perhaps? Or do you have ideas about chapters from the field guide that could be helpful to them? And finally, you are going to submit your weekly work. Please note that you have several things that you need to submit. You'll be submitting all of the writing that you did for tasks 11.2, 11.3, and 11.5. And when you make your submission, please make sure to very clearly indicate what is what. So label task 11.2, label task 11.3, label task 11.5. That will help me tell your writing apart, and you'll make sure that I'm grading the right things. That is all for this week. If you have any questions or anything you want help with, feel free to let me know.